My name is Jerry Gill. Today is September 18th, 2009. I'm visiting with Dr. Bill Taggart at First United Methodist Church in Stillwater, Oklahoma. This interview is for the O State Stories Project, which is part of the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program. Bill, thanks for taking time this morning to be with us.
I'm honored.
We're looking forward to know it's going to be an interesting interview because we've shared some stories before. Just wanted to kind of, first of all, start maybe at the beginning. Can you tell me, Bill, a little bit about where you grew up, a little bit about your family, your early life, some things you remember early in your life?
I was born in Missouri, as you noted on that document, but my parents moved to western Oklahoma and homesteaded before I was a year old. So I've been called a native Oklahoman quite a few years of my life.
Whereabouts was that, Bill?
Way out in Cimarron County in western Oklahoma. And we lived through the drought and the Dust Bowl and all that out there. And I think the thing that cured most of that was World War II because of demand for agriculture, and we had rain. And both of those things put together helped the country in spite of the fact that it was a war.
Where did you go to high school, Bill?
There's a little rural country school called Plainview, north of Texoma, between there and Boise City, Oklahoma.
What's your expression? It's not the end of the world, but you can see it from there.
Almost. I lettered on the basketball team all 4 years, but there's only 7 of us went out to play.
You had to be careful about fouling out, didn't you? And then those guys finished the game.
We outdoor court. We didn't have any indoor.
Bill, tell a little bit about your family and the Depression. I guess those were pretty tough times out there. What are some of your early memories about? So you grew up in basically in the 20s and 30s? Actually,
the worst thing was the dust storm years, but our family we weren't a big farm area like a lot of the people were, but we had a real good crop in 1929, and the price dropped to, just a little nothing, 25 cents a bushel for wheat crop, and cattle prices were extremely low. And then also in 1930, we had a good crop. It was still cheap, but it all hailed out. So we went into that Dust Bowl year after my dad had bought farm machinery and got away from the horse farming. So we had some tough years financially, but we never went hungry. We survived those dust storm years. I went through 3 different ones where it's so black you couldn't see your hand in front of you. So those were pretty tough years.
What kind of how many acres was your farm or your ranch?
There's 4 sections counting the pasture land for cattle. And my dad bought another quarter section at 3% interest, and we never could pay the interest on it. So we finally lost that. So he said to all of his children, don't ever go in debt.
Wow. Is there a story or two particularly you can remember about the Dust Bowl? You hear a lot of stories about dust up above the windows and covering the crops, and certainly this must have made a pretty strong impression on you, Bill. I mean, were some certain events that you remember particularly about the Dust Bowl?
Oh, of course, there was fences covered over with tumbleweeds and sand, and cattle could walk right up over them. But you talked about one event. There was a funeral of a little, I think 3 or 4-year-old girl in Boise City. And my parents and I and a neighbor, an uncle of mine rather, went to that funeral. And as we left the funeral, one of those great big clouds of dust came in as the procession was going to the cemetery in our local community. And the people thought it was the end of the world. But we drove into a place that was called a roadhouse. That wasn't a very good place in those times. And we stayed there for about 3 hours before it got light enough that we could see to drive. Wow. And my uncle, I was old enough to drive, my uncle told us where the end of the road was so we didn't get off in it. We finally got home after that. But that was just black as night for about 2 hours in the middle of the afternoon.
Wow. Bill, what year did you graduate from high school?
1938.
38. Did you go to Oklahoma State right after?
No, I went to Panhandle A&M College for 2 years and then went into service. And I was later then afterward on the GI Bill, went to school here at OSU and graduated. It was Oklahoma A&M then in 1947. I went immediately to work then in Stevens County as a 4-H agent down there, assistant county agent.
Bill, go back. Could you share a little bit about your experience in World War II? What theater you were in?
I was in the Army Air Force, and that's about all I care to say about it.
Okay, all right. Were you in Europe or in Europe? Okay. Bill, so you then got out of the Army and right after the war in
1945, October 31.
Okay.
And then I worked for a year and then came back over. That's when I came to Oklahoma State in the fall of 1946, and then went a full year and graduated. So
summer and all. Right, and used the GI Bill.
Yeah.
To help us. You said
and turned back a lot of it that I never already had a master's degree program laid out with for the whole thing, and then the district director for the extension service said you'll never need a master's degree working for the Cooperative Extension Service. So I went to work, and later I wished I'd have got that master's degree, but it would have been a research degree then, and I wanted to work with people.
Well, Bill, kind of jumping back, Bill, what influenced you to enroll at Oklahoma State University? Did you have a background? Had you come up 4-H or FFA to the university before?
I was in 4-H most of my early years in life, but it was, I think, mainly I wanted to be in the extension service, and I think I felt like that degree would carry more weight than one from Panhandle A&M College out there.
Bill, why did you want to be an extension director? Did you know that when you first went to college, that's what you wanted to be?
Probably, I think so. I thought first about trying to be a veterinarian, but we had a county agent named Uncle Bill Baker, and we just all thought he was the greatest fellow in the world. And he sat me down and talked to me one time about that was a good thing to be involved in, and I think that kind of started me along that route, and I thought I'd better do that. That's what I wanted to do.
Is it kind of a role model to you?
Because it was working with people.
Okay. What? So you enrolled in 47. Who was the dean of the college at that time?
Al Darlow.
Al Darlow.
Dr. Darlow.
One of the famous deans, really.
Yes, sir.
What do you remember about Dean Darlow?
Oh, I remember him teaching some courtesy courses still back in animal science, where our undergraduate degree is, and he also remained judging livestock a time or two, and I remember that. But that's probably all I remember. I remember more about him after he retired than before.
You talk about the livestock judging. Were you on the livestock judging team when you were a student?
No, I was not. I didn't have time, I thought, after the war, and tried to get on through because I was married then, and our oldest daughter had been born, and thought I better get to work.
Get as many hours in as you could and get out of there. Huh? What about your undergraduate experience, Bill? Can you talk a little bit about where most of your classes were? What buildings were your classes in?
Gee, I hadn't thought of that in years. No, I really hadn't thought of it in years. There was the old animal husbandry building, and that's quite a few of them. And then I think, no, that's later on that there was a chemistry building. I recall that I thought I had to get on out in a year, and the summer I took 18 hours both semesters and 10 hours in summer in order to be able to graduate in a year.
Okay, so you got out in 3
semesters. So I didn't really have time to do anything much. Just lived in Veterans Village, and that was an experience.
Little bed village?
Yeah. We went home for Christmas one time, and it turned extremely cold and froze everything in that building, including the bathroom stool and everything that had water in it. And so it took quite a while for all that to be repaired so we could get back and live in it. We were glad to go on and get to work. And I worked with a great fellow named Fred Huffine. He was the main county agent down at Stevens County at Duncan. And I learned a lot from working with him. Learned a lot about people and how to approach. And I always say, if you don't know the answer to something, just admit it and say, I'll find out for you. And in fact, that's something that all of us should do, whatever we're doing.
Well, kind of just ask one more time about OSU. Were there some professors you had that were influential to you that in that year that you were at OSU that you remember that it made impression on you?
Yes, one's named Glenn Bratcher. He was head of the animal science department. And then Dr. Jim Watley, he taught animal breeding. And he was a great teacher. And Joe Whiteman was another one that taught, actually he taught statistics, but I didn't take that. It was in a master's degree program.
Who was your advisor, Bill, when you were in?
He was later president of the college at South Dakota. Gee, I have a blank space. I can't remember his name. He was my undergraduate advisor.
Beeson?
He was a great,
Beeson?
No.
Harlan.
No. Well, anyway, maybe I'll think of it before we get through it.
Sure, no problem. So your first assignment then, Bill, as you said earlier, you were at Stevens County as assistant county agent.
Yes.
Under, you mentioned the individual.
Fred Huffine.
Fred Huffine. And so did you have some surprises, Bill, when you got there that you didn't think about being in the county extension work?
Fred was a great teacher.
Mm-hmm.
I remember one time we, as county agents back at that time, were called upon to do minor veterinary work for people, and to go out and help castrate calves or whatever that needed to be done. But the phone rang one morning. We were both in the office, and he answered the phone, and he turned to me and he said, "Have you ever dehorned a cow?" And I said, "Oh yes, I grew up doing that. Come on, we're going to go out and do it." So he had a saw and everything to use. And we got out there and he grabbed us. We put the rope around the animal to make it lay down, like you're supposed to do. And he grabbed the saw and cut it off. And on the way back in, he said, "That's the first one I ever dehorned." He said, "Did I do it all right?" He asked me how to do it all going out there. So he said, there are sometimes you need to do things. You need to learn how.
You do, absolutely. Well, so you kind of share after Stevens County, can you kind of share your career where your career track, some of the places you were at?
Yes, I went then to Loga in Dewey County, which is south of Woodward, between there and Clinton, and was there 3 years. And it's a strange place to work because the little old town of Tologa in the middle, but there were 4 towns, Visai and Aledi and Sealing, and then even down in the south part of the county, over at Fay. All of those communities were separate within themselves and had different type of people in agriculture, mainly the kind of crops that they grew and all that. But that's quite an experience working in that setting. And I just thought if I ever made over $1,000 a month, I'd do awful well.
Which brings up a question. When you were assistant county agent there in Stevens County, what was your salary? First year?
I started out at $2,700 a year.
$2,700 a year?
Yeah.
Not a month?
No.
No. Well, Bill, what are the major responsibilities of a county agent? What are you expected to do as county agent or county extension director, I guess they call it now?
You were an advisor regarding, I think primarily the pest control in both crops and animals. And then in the larger towns, there was also a lot of calls for city people for trees and plants and gardening and of course the 4-H club work that spanned a lot of different activities and involved working with volunteer leaders and people. And again, the whole success was working with people, serving people, working for the taxpayer, for people.
You really got to know the people, the county really well, as aging most of the families,
yes,
chicken farm families.
One of the great things about, I think, and I've talked to other people that's been in extension service, once you had been there for several months or year or so or longer, and you'd really served and helped people, you were kind of an adopted member of their family. And it was a great privilege and an honor to be included in so many different families. And if you were there at lunchtime, you would offend them if you didn't eat lunch with them.
That's great.
So
what were you in charge of helping recruit volunteer workers for, say for 4-H with?
Oh yes, we had the training all the time for that. And I think that the secret of course, you try to get parents or relatives of those that were in the club work at that time, but the success of the program depended largely on how well those volunteers worked, because one person cannot be at all those clubs at one time or on any farm or bunches of farms at one time.
There's some strong families traditionally.
That's true.
Year in, year out.
And particularly in showing of animals and showing crops at fairs and things of that sort.
Bill, did you work, I guess, pretty closely, of course, with the county fair each year?
Oh, my, yeah. You're secretary of the fair in a lot of those places. And I worked pretty close in my case with ag teachers, and I've had some awfully good ones that I shared work with. And we both kind of agreed that there wasn't any point in trying to fuss over who had which children as members, but there were so many of them that weren't members of either one of the clubs that we were after. So in general, I think back at that time, most of them stayed in 4-H until they were eligible and old enough to be in high school for the FFA program. And they could work as a local community much more intensively than I could across the county. It was better for the kids.
And then I guess, too, the county office, the extension office was sort of a OSU office as well. And
yes, it's Cooperative Extension Service, Oklahoma State University. We had the backup of a lot of specialists here in various subject matter fields who supported us as background information. We could call them on the phone and get help when we needed it, particularly in the insect world and that sort of thing. And we'd hold meetings and training sessions for producers and for people of all kind. We had one person in Woodward. I remember that he was a specialist in roses, and I learned more from him. Or if I had something I could not answer, varieties or something, I could refer him to him, and he'd help out. And he'd come to short courses that we'd hold and talk about it.
Yeah,
you used all those kind of people you could locally.
Tom Thedford, I was visiting with him recently, and your name come up saying he worked with you. Of course, he was out of veterinary medicine, extension work, and worked with you. So you had all these from the different fields and specialists in different areas that work with you. Oh my, yes.
Great backup program.
Great. Well, Bill, you were trained, and then you had a year as assistant, but what surprised, what was different when you actually got out there doing the work, than what you thought it'd be like? Were there some surprises for you, some aha experiences, things you didn't expect?
Well, I'm sure there were a lot of them, but you try to erase those things out of your mind.
I've forgotten them now.
I don't recall any particular one because we always had that backup program, and our district director at the time I worked was Mr. J.M. Curley Ives, and he impressed on us very much, if you don't know the answer, don't be afraid to say no, but I will find out for you. And I had a lot of those circumstances. Because you couldn't know all there was to know about everything. No way.
His name is
Curly Ives, I-V-E-S.
Okay, H-I-V-E-S, Ives.
I-V-E-S.
I-V-E-S, okay, I know. Ives.
He was a top-notch person. He was our district director in northwest Oklahoma.
So you had different district directors around the county agents. You didn't report directly to the state office.
There's 4 districts in the state.
Okay, got it. What... can you share some highlights, Bill, of your professional career? You said you went from Stevens County as assistant agent to Dewey County. Then did you go to Woodward County from there? Yes.
I was in Dewey County 3 years. Then in Woodward it was almost 7 years. Oh, I don't know. The president, when you're talking about highlights, President Dwight Eisenhower made a drought tour of all across the United States, and one of the stops was Woodward County. And to be involved in all of the preparation, working with Secret Service people and the preparation of everybody at the Republican Party at that time, President Eisenhower's Republican, was a lawyer, Reuben Sparks from Woodward. So he and I worked very closely together, and we had to be sure every person on that route was checked out on the Secret Service and all of this. And it was a great experience. But I'll remember the morning that President Eisenhower arrived in the old Columbine. That was Air Force One then. And it was cold January morning, January 10th, I think it was, I remember. And there was probably 3,000 people lined up outside the fence in that cold morning, wrapped in blankets and all the clothing they get. They'd stood there for quite a while. And as soon as we got in the limo and the Secret Service man was sitting, I was in the middle and he was on my right, the driver. And President Eisenhower said, "How long have these people been here?" And I told him, and he said, "Let's go greet him." And that Secret Service man, I could just hear him just feel like he was crunching up like, "Oh no, let's don't do this." And President Eisenhower was in the back seat on the side that he had drove around. He rolled the window down and waved at that crowd all the way around that. When he got through, he said, "This is an inspiration for me." And he said, "When I reviewed the troops in Europe," he said, "it's same feeling, how great it is to have great people."
Great story.
So I always thought a lot of him.
And did you have barbecue for lunch?
They had private lunch for him. He went on somewhere else. You thought it was going to be...
I thought maybe we brought our barbecue specialist name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what was his name?
Yeah, but usually when we had a special event, we always had the barbecue.
No, he was there early in the morning. And the farm family, by the way, that were interviewed on his visit there, he went out in the wheat field and all that, but they insisted that he go inside their home and visit with the farmer's wife and the children. So all that had to be secret ahead of time. They couldn't even tell their kids until that morning. They could stay out of school. But one of the funny things that happened was that the cousin of this fellow that farm they visited, he went over before the president came, and there was Carl Peoples out on top of the barn nailing down some tin that had been loose for years. And he went home, Estel went home and told his wife, he said, "I saw a crazy person today," and he said his name was Carl. On a cold morning to do that. But these people, they were so glad that the President of the United States had come into their home, just common people.
But did after the Woodward job, did you then go into administrative position?
No, I was called. My children's mother died out there with cancer. And about a year after that, Luther Brannon was this extension director, and he called me and asked if I would come in and be a state livestock specialist. That's the time when you became an instant one. Mm-hmm. But he said, "Now you'll have to get an advanced degree in that field." I'd already finished the master's by hit and miss, correspondence, a lot of that, short courses. Mm-hmm. But anyway, he said, "I can't pay you any more money, but when you get it done, hopefully the budget will be better." So, and he said, "We want you to take off full year and go to school." And so I came in and I served 7 years in that field.
So what year did you take off, Bill? Do you remember?
1958.
So you finished your PhD in 1 year?
No, I didn't. I finished that master's degree at that next summer, and then got to be the doctor's degree in 1964.
Okay.
So I took it over a period of time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you were 7 years in as livestock specialist, extension, and so you
traveling the whole state. Yeah.
So you traveled through the state.
Went to a lot of state and county fairs. And
let go roll.
I saw a lot of pigs and all that.
Have you got some favorite stories from your time as livestock? Surely there's some good stories there.
Well, as a state's educator or specialist, you never knew quite how to approach a audience in their background training and understanding. And I recall we were separate from the black folks at that time, of the 1890 people are called. And I was called to go over to eastern Oklahoma with Harold Berry as the county agent there, and he was a good one, and visit with Mr. Luther Scales. He had a problem in ventilation barn is hogs. Well, I had no idea. And he said, or Harold said, you come early because we're going out there early. So I was out there on time, and Mr. Scales had a modern hog barn, and I didn't know that he had bought hogs from Jim Watley, who did swine research here. And he had a great herd of swine. And the problem was so simple in that barn that even I could understand it. And he said, come on down here in the well house, and I've got some protein supplements for my cows. And I want you to tell me which is the best. Well, I got down there and he had cottonseed cake and soybean cake and a protein block. Well, I misunderstood how much he might know. I should have known with his progressive hog farm, but I made a mistake and didn't realize it. So I went through all of those step by step, very simply, and explained the new need for one cow and the cost. And I got that protein block, and this is twice, 2.5 times as expensive as some of the others. And he kind of grinned at me and he said, yes, sir, I understand, but be all right with you if I use that protein block on quail days? So he suckered me. Then he said, come on in the house, and Miss Scales will have some cookies and coffee and milk. And it was a spotless kitchen, and they were delicious.
That's great.
And great experiences. I could tell those kind of things all day long.
You got some more good ones.
One of them was real funny. I'll tell one other one. When I was at Woodward, I took some 4-H club boys down to Oklahoma City to livestock judging one spring. We didn't have any animals down there that year. And we were in the judging contest. And I explained to these boys the night before, 2 in one room, 2 in another, and me and a third one in the old Huckins Hotel. And we're going to get up early and get out there. So that morning came, and I called one room, and they answered quickly, and yep, we're getting ready. Called the other room, no answer. And they kept calling. So I dressed quickly and went up there, and Jerry Wells came to the door. I'll never forget it. I said, Jerry, didn't you hear that phone ring? Yes, sir, but it wasn't our phone number. That's when there was 2 longs and shorts, and all that.
Party lines.
Party lines, yeah. I could tell those kind of things all day long.
Well, Bill, so after your 7 years as livestock specialist,
Jim Watley had me come into he was Dean of Agriculture then, and be a program leader for agriculture. And I served in that capacity for, about 5 years, I guess. And then Frank Baker became dean, and I was the associate director then through the process of application and employment. And I served as associate director for about almost 7 years.
Who was the director at that time, Bill? Who was your director that you reported to?
Charlie Browning, primarily.
Okay.
Yeah, Frank Baker first, more years, and then Charlie later.
Okay. Well, maybe kind of back to the question I wanted to ask you. Could you kind of share a little bit of your thoughts and your memories about some of those deans? We talked about Dean Darlow. Could we kind of go through Darlow and maybe through the deans you worked with, and tell me a little bit about each one and what you remember about them? We're starting with Darlow. What do you remember about Al Darlow?
Yes, I remember working over in Whitehurst for a year or two when he was the dean over there. And then I worked with Jim Watley. There's also Burr Ross was dean for quite a long time, and he was one of the instructors when I got the undergraduate degree. Dr. Briggs, Hilton Briggs, was my undergraduate advisor.
Okay.
And worked some with him, of course, as a student and a teacher. And then after Jim Watley was Frank Baker, and then Charles Browning. And I retired then while Charlie was still dean here.
I've heard a lot of stories about Al Darlow. What do you remember about Dean Darlow?
He was a very good teacher. I had one course under him a long time ago. And I remember him mainly, though, I think, as being one that worked with the animal people. And I don't remember any specific instance except when I was over in Whitehurst Hall. I recalled a time or two that visit with him, and he'd give advice. And then there was an experiment station director that I worked with over in Ag Hall that I learned quite a bit. Lewis Hawkins. Lewis was a hard taskmaster, but he kind of took me under wing and taught me a lot of things about administration. I said, you got to be tough. He said, sometimes tougher than you want to be. But we had lost a daughter to a drunk driver out in Arizona then, and they had lost a daughter also in a car wreck. And I think maybe he wanted to take me under his wing kind of as a second son. He never had a son. So I learned a lot from Dr. Hawkins. But he was pretty tough on a lot of research people if they hadn't done their homework right.
Now, you mentioned earlier Luther Brandon was when you first got in extension work, was head of extension. What do you remember about Dr. Brandon?
Well, I remember a lot about him being a real, Shawnee Brown was the first director we had, and he was a very fine director, and so was Al Darlow, or so was Luther Brandon. Luther, as I recall, he brought me in, and I've always appreciated that. And why he did that, I'm not real sure, but I guess he thought he wasn't making a mistake, and I didn't want to disappoint him. But anyway, he went into the Ethiopian project and worked over there for a long time. And that's, I guess I knew him that way too, but I don't remember any particular instance about it particularly.
Then to see your deans, then after Darlow was Baker, then was that the next dean, or is there one in there in between I'm missing?
Jim Watley.
Oh, Jim Watley, right.
Yeah, was dean, and he'd been, of course, an instructor over in animal science, and I'd known him. And he had selected me to be in a special position. It's called the Ag Leadership Program for their Ag Director for the Extension Service.
Could you say a little more about that, Bill? What about the program, the Ag Leadership Program?
Well, you were supposed to kind of be working with all of the departments in the College of Agriculture in terms for programs that might fit in short courses and agricultural work out in the counties. I did a lot of working with the department heads on insect control programs and special livestock training and that sort of thing. And it was very interesting, challenging kind of thing because it's a new position. There wasn't any blueprints to go by.
Bill, was that the beginning of the program that continues up today, the Ag Leadership
No,
Program?
it had nothing to do with that.
It's different.
That was different entirely.
Okay. Right.
I did serve in that one after I retired.
Okay. What is there some farm families that you worked with in your times as a county extension director that stand out in your mind? Are there some individuals or families you recall had some special times with?
Yes, quite a few of them, more than we'd have time to talk about, really. But a lot of them were people that worked as 4-H leaders. There's quite a few of those that stand out in my mind because they were there helping and you worked with them intensively. And then there was some that, particularly on the cattle side, that had most of the county agents back at that time also served as secretary of the Hereford Breeders Association or whatever livestock groups they had, if it was overall breeds or what. And I worked quite a bit with some of those kind, both as county director and later then, but mainly as county director, county agent then.
What, just sort of a general question, Bill, for you think about on your lengthy career, how has the College of Education changed from, when you, as a student through your career to today in the college itself? Is there any changes that you think of?
Are you talking about agriculture or education?
I'm thinking about College of Agriculture now because I want to ask you about agriculture in Oklahoma next, but just in the college, how's the college changed over the years?
Oh, I don't know that I know exactly how to answer that. I'm not an expert, but I think with the access or the introduction of computers would be one of the main things that changed the whole picture a lot. And it's certainly important today in the county extension work. You can get the information over the computer and the printout in a hurry by simply knowing the access code and all that. But we had literacy training courses when Dean Watley was there for our department heads in computer literacy. And I think the hardest thing was to get even some of our full professor department heads to come take that course because they didn't want to be looked at as though they were dumb.
Mm-hmm.
They were kind of a dread of something that new and complex, particularly if you didn't have much background in math. So that's one of the things that certainly has changed. That. Then I think when Gene Evans was director here, in the introduction to the fact sheet program, where you had the answer to a specific question in 1 or 2 sheets of paper, lowered the premium or the printing cost and made them available in every county. Then another thing that I think was extremely important, Raymond Kays was head of the Hort Department, and he and I went down and met with the people at OETA, and he started out as the first director of the gardening program, Oklahoma Gardening, and he did a tremendous job. I'll never forget one of the fellows after that, been going a couple of years, that fell out in the counties that listened to that all the time. And he came to me at some meeting, I forgot, and he said, "What a great program. It's sure a good thing you all did that." He said, "Do you know, God doesn't charge the time against you that you spend in the garden." Of course, I'd never heard that before.
That's a great story.
Or since.
Well, Bill, when we were talking about the college and you sort of asked the question, let me come back to it. How has agriculture in Oklahoma changed since you started in business years ago?
Well, from small farms to much, much larger farms, much more complex, and difficult, I think, with trying to compete with the market and the weather. Of course, that is constant through the years, but ups and downs. And then, if you're talking about it today, that farmer's got to be an expert almost in computer science, in the farm markets for futures. He's got to have his eggs in several baskets, so to speak, because you never know what prices are going to be. And there's a lot of experts that are out there as consultants helping the great big farmers. But I think the biggest change probably is from small to larger, much larger farms. Very complex.
Particularly in the Panhandle where you grew up, that really changed.
Well, everywhere, I think. But yeah, mainly there, but there's here in this county, it's not a big agricultural production of crops and all that. Always had a lot of cattle. But all up in the Osage, or on the country around Enid and Alva and Woodward and up in there, all western Oklahoma.
Larger.
Quite a difference in the western side of the state and the eastern side of the state in agriculture.
How has it changed in terms of crops versus cattle and hogs, and what's been the changes?
Well, there was lots of small hog operations then. Those no longer exist with the big hog farms.
Right.
I don't know the cattle numbers. For quite a long time, I think we were about the second or the third largest cow population of any state in the country. Maybe Texas and Kansas were ahead of us, I've forgotten. But there's always been cattle, I think, on the farms. There's always been grassland that was too rough to farm and had to be utilized with cattle, harvested the cattle.
Bill, looking back on your career, were there some highlights in your career, some milestones that you particularly remember?
Yes, I started out in the PhD program in animal science and went into that a full year. It had 60-some hours. Had a lot of the ag biochem courses and statistics, math, stat, and all that. And I really didn't want a research degree. And I went to Dr. Hillier, who was my advisor at that time, and great disappointment to him. But I said, I've got to change where I can work with people more. So I went over and into the College of Education and took courses that were working with people primarily. But I did that move on purpose. And it was a disappointment to most of my colleagues in animal science, but that's where I just felt like I was led and what I ought to do, and I did it.
Was your doctorate in the College of Education?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So you got the EDD?
Yeah.
Great.
I've got it down there.
Okay. Wonderful. Who were some of the people you remember taking classes under over there?
Dr. Richard Youngers, who taught school finance, and I didn't particularly want to take that course, but it was required. And then, let's see. My major advisor there was, I'm having trouble remembering some names this morning, but he was a great person, and I enjoyed working under him. And we became great friends after he retired, and I did too.
In addition to starting your career as assistant, county extension director, then director, and then you were associate at over all of it. You're a specialist, livestock specialist in for 7 years. And then you were associate dean in charge of all extension for the state. Then
yes, sir.
What years was that, Bill?
From about Frank Baker came in I finished in 1984. He came in late 70s, I believe, because I was almost 7 years there. But I guess one of the highlights then afterwards, in addition to being the functional director of sorts in the state, because Jim Watley said, I don't know anything about extension, you run it. And Charlie Browning essentially said the same thing, but Charlie wanted to be kept informed in a lot more detail than Jim Watley did. But I had the privilege of working at the national level with what was called the Extension Committee on Organization and Policy, which essentially was the organization for all the extension directors in the country. And serving on that committee and working with the people in Washington in legislation and a lot of the big organizations and that sort of thing was a great learning experience. But it was a great learning experience because I suppose like an Army general or something, you had to have a lot of good help or it couldn't be done. And we fought for funds all the time at the federal level, and I had some real good people that served in different capacities. That was a real pleasure.
Were you in D.C. and did you visit with congressmen?
Oh, yeah, I did some of that, yes. But primarily in the Department of Agriculture.
Who do you remember some of the people you worked with at the time? They were close friends of yours that you worked with?
Well, yes, there was a extension director in Michigan named Gordon Geyer that worked with pretty closely. He followed me in that position. And then when Ronald Reagan was elected president, there was a fellow that was in the interim program, they called it, from one administration to the other, that came from California. He's a big ag guy. And I needed to meet him because that's when I was the national president. And I got through the door to see him and lay out what we hoped we could do that year. And when I sat down in front of him, he said, do you know there's a Bill Taggart up here as a lobbyist? And I said, no. And he said, I'll tell you, the only reason you got through my door, I want to see what you look like. But said, he'd make 2 or 3 of you. He said, he weighs about 350. That's the only reason I got to talk to him. But when we had a later meeting, he agreed to come and talk to us because he was kind of the interim guy for the Reagan administration.
Part of the transition team.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, sort of speaking, you mentioned something being president of that national association. There's other special recognition or awards that you received, and I know you're a modest individual, but could you share some of the recognition awards that you received?
I worked with the Livestock Conservation, which was a Great Plains group for quite a few years, and did that mainly when I was an extension specialist. I worked then a lot with the national 4-H people and FFA people, and that was a good pleasure too, but that's probably enough of that.
Well, you received a distinguished service award, I think, did you not, through extension, as I recall?
Well, it's through the Department of Agriculture, and I didn't put on there, but I'm Alpha Zeta alum, and that was an honorary deal in agriculture, and I don't know, I've got some of them listed in that brochure.
Well, can you tell me a little bit about the Distinguished Service Award from that was in the department, the U.S. Ag Department?
That material that I gave you is a copy of that book, but it mainly is biographical information and where you served and worked, and some of the highlights of my career.
Well, what were some of the guidelines for receiving that award? Years of service and contributions you'd made to extension? Is it?
I suppose so. I never was told.
You've been on modest, Bill. I'm trying to pull that out of you. That's good.
I hope so.
But what about hobbies and special interests do you have? I know you've been retired a few years now and had a chance to do some of that. I know you love hunting and some things, but can you share some of your interests and hobbies?
I do woodwork. I can give you the high 4.5. That mainly was my hobby, but the hunting after I retired mainly was, but some a little bit before. But I've turned down a lot of invitations from ranchers to hunt quail when I was working in the counties, and I didn't think I had time to do that. I regret now that I didn't do more of that. But
did you look some of them up after you retired?
Well, we went out to far western Oklahoma and hunted coyotes some, but it's mainly to hunt pheasants. But my nephews out there always wanted to hunt coyotes instead. We got tired of going out there for that.
Well, your religious faith has always been important to you, I know.
Very much so.
And you've been a long-time leader in the First United Methodist Church here in Stillwater. In what ways has your personal faith influenced your life?
Oh, in lots of ways. I grew up in a strong Christian family, and I think that's the right foundation for any family. Fortunate indeed to have that kind of background. But then I think mainly the tragedies that's happened in my life. I don't know what you'd do if you didn't have a strong faith on which to turn. And then in the tough times in your jobs and in your work, it's impossible you always had to feel like you had direction and guidance. But like I've heard lots of other people say, I believe very strongly in prayer.
But some reflecting back as we kind of conclude here, there's a lot of individuals that you've had a chance to work with and to know, and you've mentioned some of these in the interview that are no longer with us today. Could you kind of sort of going back and thinking when you as a student in your early career, some people that influenced you and what you remember about them that you could share with us that just had an impact on your life?
Yes, sir. Quite a few of them in church. There's one named Hog Thompson that was in animal science, and I never had any coursework under him, and I've already mentioned Lewis Hawkins. And then there have been people at the county level that I had strong support from, and then I've mentioned Fred Huffine, who worked. I learned a lot from Fred just by following and listening. And, there's lots of others that I probably don't recall it. There's one professor when I was struggling with advanced analytical chemistry working toward a PhD. And I took that course as a 7-hour course in the summertime, the first time I came back as a full-time student. And I broke more glass probably than any other student in the class, and he got me off to the side. He was in our Methodist church too, and I've long since forgotten his name. I'd have to look it up on my transcript. And he said, "You're having trouble in this course," but he said, "I see you trying." He said, "Would you want to come to my house and let me tutor you?" What a blessing that was. But I don't know, I'm kind of a stubborn rascal, but I decided I wasn't going to disappoint him. I never worked so hard in my life. I made an A in that course.
Great. Thanks, Stuart. You had a lot of folks influencing.
I wouldn't have done it if you hadn't had that confidence in me. I'm positive of that. But some of the courses I had have done make a good degree in, or some of the most important good grade in that I made the most progress in, probably. I had difficulty with math stat because I didn't have the right math background. And Joe Whiteman was I didn't even understand that when Bob Morrison taught it. That brings up another thing I'll tell you in a little bit. But anyway, that course when in animal science, it was called Research in Animal Science or something of that sort. Joe Whiteman taught it. It all began to kind of open up, and I could see the sense in all of these different principles and all that. And it made a whole lot of sense then. And I really enjoyed that later then. But I didn't have the right background for it. Later, whenever I was doing my research for the dissertation, I was at the livestock show in Oklahoma City, and I was down there in a room by myself, and I took all my work that I was writing part of that dissertation with me, and I left it in the car one evening and was too tired to work, and someone broke into it and took the briefcase. And it took me about a year to put all that stuff back together.
Wow.
But that was one disappointment for sure. But it was all on computer cards, all the research. So we just had to haul the cards back. They hadn't been destroyed yet. And that was good.
Well, it was. Wow. Well, Bill, let me turn the coin a little. You talk about people that influenced you in your life that were mentors to you and were special. Can you think of some people that worked under you that you take a special pride in, that you recall, or some people you'd like to share that you influenced their lives and maybe mentored them?
One of them was named Aubrey Wilson.
Ah.
And of course, Fred Huffine, that I've already mentioned. And then, I can remember some individuals in the county, but Pat Patrick at Clinton was another one that I thought a lot of. And Vernon Stevens that worked later as an area agent for us. Well, I could just name hundreds of those, but if you don't learn something with everybody with whom you associate, you haven't been listening. And you can learn if you just don't talk too much.
That's why we got 2 ears and one mouth, right? You should listen twice as much as you speak.
No, that's true. I mean, you learn more. That's why you've got 2 ears and one mouth, isn't it? I read somewhere.
Exactly right. Well, two kind of final questions, Bill. One, just reflecting, kind of looking back on your life from a young man out in the Panhandle in the middle of the Depression. You ever imagine where your life would take you? I mean, looking back, saying, how did I get here? I mean, it's been an amazing career. I mean, and I'm saying this for you because I know you're a humble guy would say it, but I mean, you come from a farm in the middle of nowhere, out in the Oklahoma Panhandle in Depression. You come through and you go through and survive World War II. You come through the ranks and you go up to Associate Dean for extension of the whole state of the Oklahoma. Did you ever imagine in your wildest dreams that your life would lead you there?
Well, the first thing I heard you say on this question was in the next to the final question, wasn't
it? Yes. Yes.
Well, I think I would have never thought that I would have done the kind of things that I had the opportunity to do. But you just, opportunities open up, and there you have to do the best you can with whatever you have and whatever opportunities you're given. And I tried to make the most of those. But I think despite a career, but if I've, to say it another way, maybe a cliched kind of thing, and not really that, it's pretty important to me. The most important accomplishment I've made is my family.
You tell us a little bit about your family?
Well, they're all good Christian people. And they've always been. And when their mother died, I think, well, it just looked like it is because Gary, the youngest one, he was just about 3.5 years old. And my oldest daughter, Karen, that was killed, was 11 or 12. But I think out of some of those kind of things come growth and blessings that maybe wouldn't have otherwise happened. There had to be a lot of responsibilities that they had to share, and learning to manage their school lunch funds and things that way, their allowances, and being more independent, maybe independent upon each other within the family. And they're still that way. And I've got a lot of good grandkids too, and some great grandkids. Got one grandson that's going to hope to be a youth minister. They're all active in their churches. So I'm proud of them.
Bill, are there other special memories you have of your career in your life, the special times in your life that are important to you, professionally or personally?
I don't recall any particularly right now. That hobby you mentioned, I've pursued that pretty strongly because it was a relief from the tensions that you dealt with, which you dealt. But I've never sold anything that I've ever made. I give it away. And I don't want that to sound like boasting. That's not me. But somehow I just felt like that's what I was supposed to do with it. So I spent quite a bit of money and quite a bit of time over 40 years of doing those sort of things and being glad of it. This pumpkin patch is coming up shortly here at the church. I made things for that for several years. I've never sold anything and don't intend to, but I've got a list of hundreds of articles I've given away. And the only reason I keep a list is so I don't give the same person the same thing twice. I can't remember. So my memory's pretty weak.
Bill, you've had certainly a great life, a long life, and
I've been honored. I've been very fortunate.
And been very influential in thousands of lives that you've affected. Looking back, how do you hope people will remember Bill Taggart?
Well, I hadn't given that any thought, but that maybe he was one that tried to help them.
So, kind of that land grant philosophy of service to others, important in your life.
Yeah, that's what it is.
But,
and I don't mean that to just sound like goody-goody. That's not me. I don't want to leave that impression.
And you would. Bill, what is there anything, we've talked about a lot of different things, and we could probably talk all day, and maybe we need to come back and do this again. What would you like to mention? Any comments you'd like to make, or is there something we missed that you'd like to talk about as we conclude our conversation?
I've always enjoyed being a humorist of sorts, kind of a poor one at times, but I think I've learned from the interviewee here, or the interviewer, that he doesn't know how to count, because back about 10 questions ago, he said, the next two will be the last.
That's right. I'm not a math major, a history major.
But I've learned that as in teaching or trying to teach, whether it's in a work session or in church anyway or whatever, sometimes when I've learned to work with audiences, and when you begin to see that first off, they don't want to hear somebody talk all the time. If you can involve them in the discussion, they're going to go home learning more than if you didn't do that. And then I've learned when sometimes the crowd or the audience gets a little bit tired, some kind of a humorous situation will revive that audience. They think you're going to do it again somewhere. I suppose. I don't know. I've learned that. But you learn a lot as you work with people. You have to, or you'll never succeed, I don't think. And I think that'd be true with whatever one does.
Well, I appreciate it. You called my hand, so I can't ask you any more questions. I guess that concludes it. But I want to thank you for taking the time to be here today. And you're right, humor does make a lot of things go better, doesn't it? Okay.
Thank you very much.